Bare footprints, tiny, fading, scattered in the snow. A child's backpack lies half buried beneath a tree, its zipper frozen shut. The wind howls through the Appalachian pines like a warning, and in the silence, a man with a scar kneels beside the tracks, not speaking, not blinking, just following her footprints deeper into the forest. Behind him, the snow begins to fall heavier. Ahead, the girl is running out of time. "We're going on a little trip," Corrine had said that morning, her voice unnaturally bright. "Just you and me. Won't that be fun?" Lena had nodded, though fun was not a word she associated with Corrine, not since her adoption from the orphanage 2 years ago. Not since Corrine had met Ira Calloway 6 months after that, and certainly not since Corrine had discovered she was pregnant 3 weeks ago. The car climbed higher into the mountains, past the point where the plows had cleared the roads. Lena watched silica frost patterns form on the window beside her. Corrine was on the phone again, speaking in that hushed, urgent tone she used when talking to Ira. "It'll be taken care of by this afternoon," she said, glancing in the rearview mirror at Lena. "Yes, I'm sure. There won't be any connection to us." Lena pretended not to listen, seeming invisible, making herself small. In her sketchbook, hidden in her backpack, dark images filled the pages, shadowy figures, flames, a woman screaming. Dreams, Corrine called them when she'd discovered the drawings. But Lena knew they were something more. Memories, perhaps, though from where or when. The car slowed as they reached a scenic overlook. Below, the valley stretched out, beautiful and cold, dusted with snow that glittered in the winter sun. Corrine announced. She turned off the engine and twisted in her seat to face Lena. "Isn't the view pretty?" Lena nodded, uncertain. "I need you to do something for me," Corrine continued. "I want you to wait for me right here by this bench. I need to go down the road to make a call. Then I'll come back and we'll have our picnic lunch." Lena glanced out at the snow-covered ground. "A picnic?" Corrine's smile tightened. "Don't argue, Lena. Just do as you're told. Take your backpack and wait by the bench." Something in Corrine's eyes made Lena's stomach tighten with fear. But she'd learned that resistance only made things worse. "Not your shoes," Corrine said sharply as Lena moved to open the car door. "They're muddy. I just had the car cleaned. But take them off." Lena unlaced her boots with trembling fingers and set them neatly on the floor of the car. In just her socks, she stepped out onto the packed snow. The cold bit instantly through the thin fabric. "Good girl," Corrine said, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Now wait by that bench." Lena stood shivering beside the wooden bench. She waited for her stepmother to pull forward just a bit. Instead, Corrine put the car in reverse, executed a neat 3-point turn, and drove back the way they had come. "Corrine?" Lena called, her voice small against the vastness of the mountains. "Corrine!" But the car grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared around a bend, leaving nothing but silence and the occasional creak of snow-laden branches. Lena stood frozen. She'd always known Corrine didn't love her, but this? To leave her alone on a mountain in winter? Minutes passed. The temperature seemed to drop with the realization that Corrine wasn't coming back. Lena's toes grew numb inside her damp socks. She climbed onto the bench and pulled her feet up, hugging her knees to her chest as tears began to fall. "Help," she whispered, though there was no one to hear. When the numbness in her feet became painful tingling, Lena knew she couldn't stay at the overlook. If she remained, she would freeze. She slid off the bench, wincing as her feet touched the snow. Her socks were already soaked through. She peeled them off. Better bare feet than wet feet, she remembered from some half-forgotten lesson. Clutching her backpack to her chest, Lena began to walk, not back along the road. That would take her nowhere except past Corrine's house. Instead, she headed into the trees, toward what looked like a trail. Maybe it led to a ranger station or a cabin. Maybe someone would help her. The forest closed around her like a living thing. Pine boughs heavy with snow created a canopy that dimmed the afternoon light. Each step was agony as her bare feet broke through the crust of snow. She tried walking on fallen pine needles where she could find them, but they were scattered and sparse. One step at a time, she told herself. As daylight began to fade, panic set in. The trail she'd been following seemed to disappear, or perhaps she'd wandered off it without noticing. The trees all looked the same. Her feet had gone from painful to numb again. Her thin jacket offered little protection against the dropping temperature. She needed shelter. Ahead, a massive fallen tree created a small hollow where its roots had torn from the ground. Lena crawled into the space, pulling her backpack in after her. Inside, she found a pencil and her sketchbook. With trembling hands, she tore out pages and crumpled them, creating a small nest. Not warm, but better than nothing. As darkness fell completely, Lena curled into a tight ball within her paper nest. From her backpack, she pulled out her one treasure, a small charm on a broken chain, a silver star that she'd had for as long as she could remember. Before the orphanage, before Corrine, She clutched the star in her fist and began to hum a melody she didn't remember learning but somehow knew by heart. The notes drifted up through the roots of the fallen tree and into the night air, carried by the wind through the silent forest. Miles away, in a cabin set deep in the woods, Simon Wilder looked up from cleaning his hunting rifle. Outside, the wind had changed direction, carrying with it a storm front and something else, something that made the scar tissue on his face and hands tighten. Simon moved to the window, his large frame silhouetted against the warm light of the cabin. At 44, he was still a powerful man, though the events of 5 years ago had left him with more than physical scars. The attack that took his wife Casey and their daughter Ella, he'd moved to this remote cabin afterward, unable to bear the pitying glances of neighbors, the well-meaning casseroles, the gentle suggestions of therapy. Here, alone with his grief and guilt, he hunted, fished, chopped wood. He survived, though he hesitated to call it living. Tonight, though, something pulled at him. The approaching storm, yes. The barometer was dropping rapidly, but something else too. He checked his weather radio. 8 to 10 inches expected overnight. A good night to stay inside by the fire. But first, he needed to check his deer stand and bring in more firewood. Donning his heavy coat and gloves, Simon stepped out. The first flakes were already falling, small crystalline stars that caught the light from his porch lamp. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to the woods, even in darkness. The deer stand was a quarter-mile from his cabin. As he approached, Simon noticed something unusual, small tracks in the fresh snow. He knelt to examine them, human footprints but tiny. A child's. And bare, no boot marks, not even socks. Just the perfect impression of small, naked feet. Simon felt his pulse quicken. A child out here? Barefoot in this weather? He stood, scanning the darkened forest. The tracks led away from the road, deeper into the woods, and they were fresh, the edges still sharp. Simon began to follow them. The light from his flashlight bounced across the snow as he moved, tracking the increasingly erratic path. The footprints grew farther apart in some places, the child running, and then closer together, dragging slightly. The tracks led him to a massive fallen oak, its root system torn from the ground years ago. The footprints ended there. Simon approached cautiously. "Hello?" he called, his voice rough from disuse. No answer came, but as he crouched down to peer into the hollow, his flashlight revealed a small form curled into a tight ball, surrounded by what looked like crumpled paper. A child, so still that for a moment, Simon thought he was too late. Then he saw the faint rise and fall of breathing, and relief washed through him. Alive, but barely. The child, a girl, was hypothermic, her skin pale with a bluish tinge, her dark hair crusted with ice crystals. Beside her lay a small backpack and, clutched in her tiny fist, something that caught the light of his flashlight and reflected it back. Simon reached in carefully and lifted the child into his arms. She was light, too light, and cold. Her eyes remained closed, her breathing shallow. "I've got you," he murmured, wrapping his coat around her. As he turned to carry her back to his cabin, the silver object fell from her limp hand onto the snow. Simon bent awkwardly, cradling the child with one arm while retrieving the item with his free hand. It was a silver star charm on a broken chain, a charm identical to the one he'd given his daughter Ella on her 7th birthday. The warmth of Simon's cabin enveloped them as he shouldered the door open. Inside, the fire he'd built earlier had burned down to glowing embers, but it was still infinitely warmer. With gentle care that belied his large, scarred hands, Simon laid the girl on his couch and quickly built up the fire. He wrapped her in blankets, carefully examining her feet for frostbite. They were red and swollen. With a bowl of lukewarm water, he began to warm them gradually. As he worked, Simon studied the child's face. She was young, perhaps 8 or 9, with dark hair and pale skin. There was something familiar about the curve of her cheek, the arch of her eyebrows. His mind was playing tricks, seeing ghosts where there were none. The girl remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. Simon checked her backpack, looking for identification or medication. Inside, he found a sketchbook, a few granola bars, a change of clothes, and a small, worn photograph of a younger version of the child with a woman whose face had been scratched out. The sketchbook drew his attention. Opening it, Simon felt a chill. Page after page was filled with dark, disturbing images. A house engulfed in flames, shadowy figures with indistinct faces, a woman with her mouth open. The drawings were crude but powerful, filled with a terror. One image in particular made Simon's hands shake. A man with a distinctive mark across his face, not unlike Simon's own scar, standing over a fallen woman. Behind them, barely visible, was a small cupboard with a child hiding inside. Simon closed the sketchbook with unsteady hands. This child had seen things no one should witness, but who was she? And how had she ended up barefoot in the woods? A small sound from the couch pulled him from his thoughts. The girl was stirring, her eyelids fluttering. Simon moved back, dark eyes opened, unfocused at first, then widening with fear. The girl sat up abruptly, pressing herself against the back of the couch. "It's okay," Simon said, keeping his voice gentle. "You're safe. I found you in the woods." The girl stared at him, her gaze fixing on the scar that ran from his right temple down his cheek to his jaw. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed by terror. She tried to scramble away, nearly falling off the couch. "I won't hurt you," Simon said. "I promise. I just want to help." The girl froze, her eyes darting around the cabin. Her gaze settled on the door. "There's a blizzard," Simon said. "You wouldn't make it far. Get warm. You can leave when the storm passes if that's what you want," Simon asked. He moved slowly to the kitchen area. "I'm going to make some soup. You don't have to talk, but food will help you get warm from the inside." As he heated chicken soup on the stove, Simon kept his movements deliberate and calm. The girl watched his every move. When he brought a mug of soup to her, setting it on the coffee table within her reach, she waited until he stepped back before taking it. "My name is Simon. Simon Wilder. I live here alone." The girl gave no indication that she'd heard him, though her eyes remained fixed on his face, particularly his scar. "What's your name?" Simon asked. When she didn't answer, he tried again. "Where are you from? Are your parents looking for you?" At the mention of parents, something flickered in the girl's eyes. She set the half-empty mug down and withdrew again into the corner of the couch. Simon sighed. "It's okay. You don't have to talk, but I need to know if someone's looking for you." The girl's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She shook her head violently. Okay, Simon said quickly. "But tomorrow, when the storm clears, we'll need to figure something out." As night deepened and the storm raged outside, Simon made up a bed for the girl in the cabin's small second bedroom. It had been intended as Ella's room when he'd built the cabin. The room had remained empty except for a bed and dresser. Simon, unable to bring himself to decorate it or use it for storage, doing so would be a final admission that Ella was never coming home. The girl accepted the room with the same silent wariness that had characterized her since waking. Simon showed her the bathroom, gave her a clean t-shirt to sleep in, and left her alone, though he kept his bedroom door open. Sleep was elusive for Simon. He lay awake, thinking about the strange turn his isolated life had taken. A child with bare footprints in the snow, a silver star charm identical to Ella's. Dark, disturbing drawings that suggested a trauma. Coincidence, he told himself, yet something deeper than reason whispered otherwise. Around midnight, a sound pulled him from his uneasy thoughts. A small, distressed cry. Simon rose quickly and moved to the doorway. The girl was caught in the grip of a nightmare, making small, frightened sounds, though no actual words. Simon hesitated, unsure whether to wake her or let the dream run its course. Then she cried out a single word. "Daddy." The voice was different, older, changed by years and trauma, but in that one word, Simon heard an echo of his daughter. Before he could process this, the girl sat bolt upright, still caught in the grip of her nightmare. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, fixed on something invisible in the corner of the room. "They're coming," she whispered. "Through the windows." Mommy said hide. Simon moved slowly into the room. "It's just a dream," he said gently. "You're safe here." The girl's eyes found him, and recognition seemed to dawn. "Daddy?" she whispered. Then, as quickly as it had come, the moment of clarity vanished. The girl blinked, fully awake now, and shrank back against the headboard. Simon retreated to the doorway. "It's okay," he said. "Try to go back to sleep." But sleep didn't return for either of them that night. Simon sat in the main room of the cabin, watching the fire and turning over the girl's nightmare words in his mind. Morning brought clear skies and a transformed world. Snow lay deep and unmarked around the cabin, the storm having dumped nearly a foot overnight. The girl appeared from her room cautiously, still wrapped in one of the blankets. Simon, who had been up since dawn, offered her breakfast. "Pancakes," he said. "My specialty." The ghost of a smile touched the girl's lips, though it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. She sat at the small kitchen table, watching as Simon mixed batter and heated a cast-iron skillet. "We need to figure out what to do today," Simon said as he flipped a perfectly golden pancake. "Someone must be missing you." The girl's face closed off immediately. "No one?" Simon pressed gently. "No parents?" "No. Foster parents." At this, she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "You have foster parents," Simon clarified. When she nodded again, he continued, "And? They don't care that you're missing?" The girl's shoulders hunched and she seemed to curl in on herself. After a moment, she shook her head. "I see," Simon said. "What kind of people wouldn't be frantically searching for a missing child? Well, regardless, I need to report finding you." Real fear entered the girl's eyes then. She shook her head vigorously. She reached out and grabbed his arm, her first voluntary contact. Her grip was surprisingly strong for such a small hand. "No?" Simon asked, confused. "You don't want me to call anyone?" The girl released his arm and looked around frantically. Her gaze settled on her backpack, which Simon had placed on a chair. She rushed to it and pulled out her sketchbook and a pencil. With quick, determined strokes, she began to draw. Simon watched as an image took shape on the page, a woman with a hard expression, a man beside her, his face heavy with menace, and off to the side, a small figure, the girl herself, being pushed away. When she finished, she thrust the drawing at Simon, her eyes intense. "These people," Simon said slowly, "are they your foster parents?" The girl nodded, then flipped to a new page and drew rapidly again. This time, the image showed the woman driving a car, the girl in the back seat. Then the car beside what looked like a scenic overlook, the woman driving away, the girl standing alone. "Your foster mother left you at the overlook?" Simon asked, horror and anger rising in him. "Deliberately abandoned you?" The girl nodded, tears filling her eyes. Simon fought to keep his voice calm. "And the man in the drawing? Was he there too?" The girl shook her head, then drew a phone in the woman's hand. "She was talking to him? On the phone?" When the girl nodded, Simon asked, "Do you know why?" The girl hesitated, then turned to a new page. This time, she drew the woman again, but with a rounded belly. "Your foster mother is having a baby," Simon interpreted. "And she, what, didn't want you anymore because of it?" The girl's nod was barely perceptible. The pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a picture. A foster mother, pregnant, conspiring with a man, her lover, to dispose of an unwanted child by abandoning her in winter, miles from help. It was attempted murder, pure and simple. Simon ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this information. His instinct was to call the sheriff immediately, but the terror in the girl's eyes gave him pause. She clearly feared being returned to these people or to whatever system had placed her with them in the first place. "Okay," he said, "you'll stay here with me for now, until we figure this out. But," he added firmly, "we can't hide forever. Eventually, we'll need to talk to the authorities. What your foster mother did was wrong." The relief in the girl's eyes was painful to see. How desperate must she be, Simon thought, to trust a stranger, a scarred, solitary man who lived alone in the woods, more than the systems meant to protect her. "First things first," he said, returning to the now smoking skillet and removing it from the heat. "Let's eat these pancakes before they're ruined, and then maybe you can show me more of your drawings. They might help me understand what's happened to you." As they ate, Simon studied the girl covertly. In the clear light of morning, with some color returned to her cheeks, she looked healthier but still too thin, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of chronic stress or sleep deprivation. Her dark hair hung limply to her shoulders, and her eyes, when they occasionally met his, were old beyond their years. After breakfast, they settled in the main room. Simon built up the fire while the girl retrieved her sketchbook. She seemed more willing to communicate now. Page by page, she showed him her drawings. Most were dark, frightening images that suggested terrible experiences or nightmares, but interspersed were other scenes, more like memories. A woman with a kind face singing, a man, not the menacing one from earlier drawings, reading a book, a house that looked normal, peaceful before it was consumed by flames in subsequent images. "Are these memories?" Simon asked gently. "From before your foster home?" The girl tilted her hand in a sort of gesture, then pointed to her head and made a confused expression. "You're not sure?" Simon guessed. She nodded. "How long were you with those foster parents? The ones who," he couldn't bring himself to say, "abandoned you." The girl held up 2 fingers. 2 years? When she nodded, Simon continued. "And before that?" She then drew a large building with many windows and many small figures inside. "An orphanage," Simon interpreted. "You were in an orphanage. For how long?" The girl shrugged, indicating she wasn't sure. "And your parents? Your real parents?" Simon asked carefully. The girl's face clouded, and she turned to a blank page in her sketchbook. With trembling hands, she began to draw. A house, a woman screaming, flames, shadowy figures breaking in through windows, and in a small cupboard, a tiny figure hiding, watching it all unfold. As she drew, something extraordinary happened. She began to hum, softly at first, then more distinctly, a melody that Simon recognized with a shock that felt like falling. The lullaby he had sung to Ella every night of her life, the one Casey had created. The pencil fell from the girl's hand, and she looked up at Simon with confused recognition in her eyes. Then, as if the effort of remembering was too much, she swayed and slumped against the couch cushions, unconscious. "Lena? Lena," Simon called, using the name he'd seen on the photo in her backpack, but there was no response. The girl had retreated into herself again, her mind protecting her from memories too painful to bear. As Simon lifted her gently back onto the couch, covering her with a blanket, the silver star charm fell from her pocket. He picked it up, turning it over in his scarred palm. On the back, barely visible, were tiny engraved letters. E.W. Ella Wilder. Simon sat heavily on the edge of the coffee table, the charm clutched in his fist, the impossible thought finally taking shape in his mind. What if this girl wasn't just any lost child? What if, somehow, impossibly, she was his daughter, whom he'd believed dead for 5 years? The idea was absurd. He'd identified the bodies himself, and had seen the dental records that confirmed the smaller remains were Ella's. And yet, here was her charm. Here was a child who hummed Ella's lullaby, who drew images of a home invasion, a hidden child, a house in flames, who looked at his scar with a mix of fear and recognition. Had Ella somehow survived that night, been found and placed in an orphanage? It seemed impossible, the stuff of daytime soap operas, not real life. Simon moved to the bedroom and from the back of his closet retrieved a wooden box. Inside were the few mementos he'd kept from his previous life. Casey's wedding ring, a family photo taken the summer before the attack, a lock of Ella's hair from her first haircut, and a matching silver star charm, the one he'd kept from the set of 2 he'd given Ella. Mother and daughter had each worn one. He held the 2 charms side by side, identical. Not similar, not lookalikes, but the exact same design from the same jeweler, with the same tiny initials. Simon's hands began to shake. The roaring in his ears returned, and his vision tunneled briefly. He fought to remain calm. Even if by some miracle this girl was Ella, she clearly didn't remember him. The trauma had fractured her memory. Pushing her to remember might cause more harm than good. For now, he decided, he would simply keep her safe, protect her from the people who had abandoned her, and give her time to heal, to remember on her own terms. And if she wasn't Ella, then he would still help her, still protect her, because no child deserved what had been done to her, and Simon Wilder was perhaps the only person in a position to stand between her and those who had discarded her. Simon returned to the main room where the girl still slept on the couch. Gently, he placed the charm with the broken chain back into her small hand, closing her fingers around it. Her expression relaxed slightly at the touch, as if the familiar object brought comfort even in sleep. In the small, cluttered office of the sheriff's department, Gwen McKay frowned at the computer screen. The department was understaffed as usual, with the winter storm having caused multiple accidents on the main highway. As the only female sheriff in the county's history, Gwen was used to carrying more than her fair share of the workload. The report that had just come in made her coffee turn sour in her stomach. A 9-year-old girl reported missing by her foster mother, Corrine West. According to the report, the child, Lena, had wandered away during a weekend cabin trip, becoming lost in the woods near Black Ridge Overlook. Except the timing didn't add up. Corrine claimed Lena had been missing since yesterday morning, but she'd only called it in an hour ago. No search parties, no 911 call when she first discovered the girl missing. Just this belated report filed after the worst storm of the season had dumped a foot of snow on the mountains. Gwen had been a sheriff long enough to recognize the distinctive odor of bullshit. She picked up her phone and dialed the number Corrine had provided. A woman answered on the third ring, her voice brittle with artificial concern. "Mrs. West, this is Sheriff McKay. I'm following up on your missing persons report for Lena." "Oh, Sheriff, thank you for calling," Corrine gushed. "I've been beside myself with worry." "I'm sure you have," Gwen said neutrally. "I noticed that Lena has been missing since yesterday morning, but you only reported it today. Can you explain the delay?" "I was searching for her myself, of course. And then with the storm, the phones were down in the cabin area. I came back to town as soon as the roads were clear to file the report." "I see," Gwen said. "And where exactly was Lena when you last saw her?" "At our cabin near Black Ridge. We were having a weekend getaway. She went outside to play while I was making lunch, and when I called her in, she was just gone." "And you searched the area immediately?" "Of course," Corrine said. "I called and called. I walked the property. I even drove up and down the access road." "In what direction did you search first?" Gwen asked, a standard question. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "When a child goes missing, parents typically have an instinct about which way they might have gone, based on the child's interests, previous behavior, what they were doing just before. Did you search toward the road first? The woods? The overlook? All directions?" Corrine stammered. "I was frantic. I wasn't thinking logically." Gwen made a note in the file. "I understand. Now, does Lena have any distinguishing features? Birthmarks, scars, anything that would help us identify her?" "She has a small birthmark on her shoulder," Corrine said, "shaped a bit like a crescent moon." "Oh, and she rarely speaks." She's been practically mute since we adopted her from Crown Heights Orphanage 2 years ago. The doctors say it's trauma, though from what, they're not sure. Her background before the orphanage is a blank. This detail made Gwen sit up straighter. She doesn't speak at all? Very rarely, and usually only when absolutely necessary. She communicates mostly through gestures and drawings. I see, Gwen said, making another note. And was she dressed appropriately for the weather when she disappeared? Oh yes, Corinne said quickly. Warm coat, boots, hat, the works. Too careful, Gwen thought. Too rehearsed. One last question for now, Mrs. West. Was Lena carrying anything with her? A toy? A backpack? Anything? Her backpack, Corinne confirmed. It has her sketchbooks and pencils, a change of clothes, some snacks. Oh, and a little silver charm she's had since before we adopted her. She never lets it out of her sight. Thank you, Mrs. West. We'll begin organizing search parties immediately. Given the storm and the temperatures, time is of the essence. Please remain available at this number in case we need to contact you. After hanging up, Gwen sat back in her chair, tapping her pen against the desk. Something was very wrong with Corinne West's story, but without evidence, Gwen couldn't act on her suspicion. For now, she needed to focus on finding the child. She reached for the phone again, this time to organize search and rescue teams. But as she did, a deeper, more troubling thought occurred to her. A silent child with artistic talent and a crescent-shaped birthmark. Why did that sound familiar? Gwen pulled up the county's cold case files on her computer to search. Miles away, in Simon Wilder's cabin, the girl who called herself Lena was sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing again. The brief episode of unconsciousness seemed to have passed without lasting effects, though she remained silent, her earlier attempt at communication through humming apparently forgotten. Simon moved around the cabin performing everyday tasks, chopping more firewood, preparing a simple lunch, checking weather reports on his battery-powered radio, all while keeping the girl in his peripheral vision. He was afraid to leave her alone. He was afraid to examine too closely the wild hope that had taken root in his heart. The possibility that this child might be Ella was both exhilarating and terrifying. If he allowed himself to believe it, only to be proven wrong, the loss would destroy him all over again. And yet, the evidence continued to mount. The silver star charm with Ella's initials, the lullaby that only his family had known, the crescent-shaped birthmark on the girl's shoulder, visible when her 2 large borrowed t-shirts slipped to one side, identical to the one Ella had been born with. Simon had noticed another odd detail. Though the girl responded to Lena when he'd used the name experimentally, she sometimes seemed confused by it. She would look up a beat too late, or tilt her head slightly, as if trying to reconcile the name. Now, as she sat drawing with intense focus, Simon approached slowly and sat in a chair nearby. "May I see what you're drawing?" he asked. The girl, he couldn't bring himself to think of her as Lena anymore, looked up with those solemn dark eyes, so familiar and yet changed by whatever she had endured. After a moment's hesitation, she turned her sketchbook toward him. The image stole Simon's breath. It was a drawing of a woman, rendered with surprising skill for a child so young. The woman had long dark hair and a kind smile, and she was holding a small girl on her lap, reading from a book. It was Casey. Unmistakably Casey, down to the small mole near her left eyebrow, and the way her hair curled slightly at the ends. "Do you know who this is?" Simon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl frowned. She pointed to her head and made a confused gesture. "You're not sure," Simon interpreted. "But you've drawn her before?" A nod. "In your dreams?" A tilted hand, sort of. "Memories, maybe? From before the orphanage?" Another nod, more definite this time. Simon's heart was pounding so hard he wondered if the girl could hear it. "Can I show you something?" he asked. When she nodded, Simon went to retrieve the wooden box from his bedroom. He returned and sat down again, opening the box carefully. From inside, he took out the family photograph, the one taken the summer before the attack. It showed Simon, unscarred then, with Casey and a 4-year-old Ella. He held it out to the girl, watching her face closely. Her reaction was immediate and profound. She gasped, a small, strangled sound, and reached for the photograph with trembling hands. Her fingers traced over Casey's face, then Ella's, then Simon's unscarred features. "Daddy?" she whispered, the word so faint Simon almost missed it. "Yes," he said, his own voice choked with emotion. "That's me, before what happened. And that's Casey, your mother. And that's you, Ella." The name hung in the air between them, a key turning in a long rusted lock. The girl's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, not in denial but in confusion, pressing her palms against her temples as if her brain physically hurt with the effort of reconciling past and present. "It's okay," Simon said quickly. "We don't have to do this now. I shouldn't have pushed. I'm sorry." He reached to take the photograph back, but the girl, Ella, held onto it tightly, unwilling to let it go. She stared at it with desperate intensity. Suddenly, she grabbed her sketchbook and flipped to a new page. With rapid, almost frantic strokes, she began to draw. Simon watched as a scene emerged. The same family from the photograph, now in a house. A window being broken. Dark figures entering. The mother, Casey, pushing the child toward a cupboard, mouthing one word, "Hide." Simon felt sick. She was drawing the night of the attack, the night he'd lost everything. The girl kept drawing, her pencil moving faster now. The dark figures attacking Casey. Simon rushing in, fighting with one of the intruders. A lamp breaking, the broken piece slashing one attacker's face. Simon being struck from behind, falling. Casey lying still on the floor. Flames beginning to consume the house. The child, terrified, crawling from the cupboard through smoke and chaos, following the instructions her mother had drilled into her about the emergency exit. Outside, more figures, strangers, lifting her, carrying her away as the house burned. When she finished, she looked up at Simon, her eyes swimming with tears and confused recognition. "You remember," Simon said softly. "You remember that night." She nodded, then pointed at his scar questioningly. "From the fight," Simon confirmed. "One of them had a knife. But the one you drew, the one who was cut by the lamp, that's important. Do you remember anything else about him?" The girl closed her eyes, concentrating. After a moment, she opened them and drew again. A close-up of the injured attacker's face, blood streaming from a gash across his cheek. The face was partly obscured by a mask, but one detail stood out, a distinctive ring on the hand that reached up to touch the wound, a heavy signet ring with what looked like a bird of prey. Simon stared at the drawing, a cold fury building inside him. "I know that ring," he said. "It belongs to Ira Calloway. He was a business rival, someone who wanted to buy my company and the land it stood on. I refused to sell." The girl's eyes widened. She quickly flipped back through her sketchbook to an earlier drawing, the one of her foster mother with the menacing man. She pointed at the man. "That's Ira?" Simon asked, disbelief coloring his voice. She nodded vigorously. "And they abandoned you because—" Simon trailed off, the pieces suddenly clicking into place with horrifying clarity. "Because he recognized you. Somehow, he realized who you really were, a witness to murder and arson, someone who could identify him." The girl nodded again, tears streaming down her face now. She pointed at her throat and shook her head. "You couldn't tell anyone," Simon realized. "Because you don't speak, but your drawings. They must have seen your drawings and gotten scared." Simon ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this information. If what the girl was communicating was true, and he believed it was, then Ira Calloway had been behind the attack that killed Casey. An attack meant to look like a home invasion gone wrong, but actually a calculated attempt to acquire Simon's property and business. But Simon had survived, though badly injured, and so, it seemed, had Ella, rescued from the burning house by someone, firefighters perhaps or neighbors, and taken to safety. But with both parents presumed dead and no identification, she had ended up in the system, traumatized into silence, her memories fractured but not entirely gone. And then, by some cruel twist of fate, she had been adopted by a woman connected to the very man responsible for destroying her family. The coincidence seemed too great, too malevolent to be random chance. Had Ira orchestrated the adoption somehow, keeping Ella close to monitor her, to ensure her silence continued? Regardless, when Corinne became pregnant, when Ira's child was on the way, Ella had become not just unnecessary but dangerous. A potential witness who might someday remember, someday speak, someday draw the right picture for the right person. So they had tried to eliminate her again, this time by abandoning her in winter conditions where her death would appear to be a tragic accident. Simon felt rage unlike anything he'd experienced in the 5 years. A cold, clear fury that focused his mind and hardened his resolve. "Listen to me," he said, taking the girl's small hands in his scarred ones. "I believe you are my daughter, Ella. I believe you survived the fire that night, and through a series of terrible events, ended up with people connected to the man who killed your mother." The girl, Ella, watched him with solemn eyes, neither confirming nor denying his statement. "I don't know how much you remember or understand," Simon continued, "but I promise you this. I will protect you. I will not let them hurt you again, and I will make sure they face justice." Ella squeezed his hands, the first truly voluntary contact she'd initiated. Then, with deliberate care, she reached for the silver star charm that lay on the coffee table where Simon had placed it. She held it up, then pointed to him questioningly. "Yes," Simon said. "I gave that to you on your 7th birthday. You and your mother each had one." She wore hers on a bracelet. Ella closed her eyes, visibly concentrating. "Star. Bright," she whispered, the words halting and uncertain. "First star, I see. Tonight," Simon finished for her, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "It's from the lullaby your mother used to sing to you. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. Wish I may, wish I might," Ella continued in a whisper. "Have the wish. I wish tonight." She opened her eyes and looked at Simon with a mixture of fear and hope. "I wished for you," she said, each word an effort. "To find me." Simon couldn't hold back his tears. "And I found you," he said, gathering her gently into his arms. For a long moment they stayed that way, a father and daughter reunited against impossible odds. Then Ella stiffened and pulled back, urgency in her expression. Looking, she managed to say. "For me. Dangerous. Your foster mother reported you missing," Simon realized. "They'll be organizing search parties looking for a lost child." Ella nodded, fear evident in her eyes. "We need help," Simon said, thinking rapidly. "Someone who will believe us, who can protect you while we gather evidence against Ira and Corinne." Ella bit her lip, then reached for her sketchbook again. She drew a woman with kind eyes and a professional appearance, then added a small detail, a nameplate on a desk that read, "Dr. Rowe." "Dr. Rowe?" Simon asked. "Who is that?" "Help before," Ella whispered. "At orphanage." "Nice. A doctor at the orphanage?" Simon clarified. "Someone you trust?" Ella nodded. "Okay," Simon said. "We'll try to contact Dr. Rowe. But first, we need to decide what to do about the search parties. They'll be looking for a lost child in the woods, not knowing you're safe here." Ella's eyes widened with sudden realization. She pointed at her backpack, then at the woods outside. "Your backpack?" Simon understood. "We could leave it in the woods for them to find. They'd focus their search in that area, away from here." Ella nodded vigorously. "But that's only a temporary solution," Simon cautioned. "Eventually, we'll need to go to the authorities to prove who you are, who I am, and what Ira and Corinne have done." Ella's expression turned fearful again, but she nodded. "First things first," Simon said, standing. "Let's deal with the search parties. Then we'll try to contact Dr. Rowe." As Simon prepared to head back into the woods with Ella's backpack, a noise from outside caught his attention. A vehicle, approaching on the rarely used access road to his cabin. He moved quickly to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. A sheriff's department SUV was making its way through the snow, moving slowly but deliberately toward his cabin. "Someone's coming," Simon said, turning back to Ella. "Sheriff's department." Terror filled Ella's eyes. She shook her head frantically and pointed to a closet where camping supplies were stored. "Hide," Simon realized. Ella nodded desperately. Simon hesitated. His instinct was to protect her, to face whoever was coming. But what if they had legitimate reasons to suspect he had Ella? What if they had a warrant? "Ella," he said gently, "I don't think hiding is the answer. If they're looking for you, if they know you're here, hiding will only make us look guilty." Ella pointed at her drawing of Ira Calloway, then at the approaching vehicle, making a connection Simon hadn't considered. "You think Ira has influence with the sheriff's department?" Simon asked. "That this could be a trap?" Ella nodded, her expression pleading. Simon considered quickly. It wasn't impossible. Ira Calloway was wealthy and powerful. If he had allies in law enforcement, he might use them to recover Ella. "Okay," Simon decided. "The camping closet. Quick, but stay quiet." Ella slipped into the closet with the silent efficiency of a child well practiced in hiding. Simon closed the door, then quickly gathered her drawings and the family photograph, hiding them in a kitchen drawer. Just in time, a knock sounded at the door. Taking a deep breath, Simon composed his features into a neutral expression and went to answer it. Standing on his porch was a woman in a sheriff's uniform, mid-40s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her badge identified her as Sheriff G. McKay. "Mr. Wilder?" she asked. "Yes," Simon replied, keeping his voice even. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" "I'm Sheriff Gwen McKay," she introduced herself. "I'm sorry to bother you, but we're conducting a search for a missing child. A 9-year-old girl named Lena, who disappeared from a cabin near Black Ridge Overlook yesterday morning." Simon maintained a carefully puzzled expression. "I haven't seen anyone." Sheriff McKay studied his face, her gaze lingering briefly on his scar. "Mind if I come in for a moment? Just need to ask a few questions, see if you might have noticed anything unusual in the area." Simon hesitated just long enough to seem natural, then stepped back. "Of course, though I doubt I'll be much help." The sheriff entered, her eyes taking in the cabin with professional assessment. "Nice place. Isolated." "That's the point," Simon said, closing the door behind her. "Coffee?" "No thank you," she replied, moving further into the main room. "How long have you lived out here, Mr. Wilder?" "About 5 years," Simon answered truthfully. "And before that?" "Riverton," Simon said, naming the city about 50 miles away. "I worked in tech. What brought you out here?" Sheriff McKay asked, her tone conversational but her eyes sharp. "Personal tragedy," Simon said shortly. I prefer not to discuss it. The sheriff nodded as if this confirmed something. The missing girl, she continued, is described as small for her age, dark hair, dark eyes. She rarely speaks, practically mute, according to her foster mother. She was last seen wearing a blue jacket and carrying a green backpack. Haven't seen her, Simon repeated, but I'll keep an eye out. Hard to imagine a child surviving the night in that storm, though. Yes, Sheriff McKay agreed, a tightness around her mouth. Hard to imagine, especially since her foster mother waited nearly 24 hours to report her missing. Simon couldn't hide his reaction to this. 24 hours? What kind of parent waits that long to report a missing child? That's what I've been wondering, the sheriff said, watching Simon closely. One theory is that the child wasn't actually lost, that something else happened to her. Simon maintained his neutral expression with effort. What do you mean? Just considering all possibilities, Sheriff McKay said vaguely. She moved to the kitchen area, her gaze sweeping over the counters. You live alone, Mr. Wilder? Yes, yet there are 2 mugs in your dish rack, 2 plates, 2 sets of silverware. Simon silently cursed his oversight. I don't wash dishes after every meal, he improvised. Those are probably from yesterday. Sheriff McKay nodded, unconvinced. Mr. Wilder, is there something you'd like to tell me about the missing girl? I told you I haven't seen her, Simon insisted. The sheriff sighed. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Corrine West's story doesn't add up. A child goes missing and she waits a day to report it? Claims the girl was properly dressed, but search dogs found a child's sock, just one, near the overlook. And the sock had been cut off, not removed normally. The whole thing stinks. Simon said nothing, processing this information. The sheriff seemed suspicious of Corrine, not him. Here's my theory, Sheriff McKay continued. Corrine West or someone associated with her deliberately abandoned that child, maybe even hurt her. And if by some miracle the girl survived and found shelter, I'm concerned about what might happen if Corrine discovers her whereabouts before we do. She fixed Simon with a direct stare. So I'll ask you one more time, Mr. Wilder. Have you seen the missing girl? Simon made a decision. If I had, he said carefully, what would happen to her? Would she be returned to her foster mother? Sheriff McKay's expression sharpened. So you have seen her. I'm speaking hypothetically, Simon maintained. What would happen? Hypothetically, the sheriff played along. If there were concerns about a foster parent's actions, the child would be placed in protective custody while an investigation was conducted. And if the child had information about crimes committed by the foster parent or associates, would she be protected? Absolutely, Sheriff McKay said firmly. Simon weighed his options. The sheriff seemed genuine in her concern, and her suspicion of Corrine aligned with what Ella had communicated. But he had been isolated for 5 years, his trust in institutions eroded by grief and bitterness. Before he could decide, a small sound came from the camping closet, the slightest shift of weight, imperceptible if you weren't listening for it. But Sheriff McKay was trained to notice such things. Her head turned toward the closet, her hand moving instinctively toward her holstered weapon. Mr. Wilder, she said quietly, is there someone else in this cabin? Simon closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Yes. The missing girl? Another nod. May I see her? Just to confirm she's safe and unharmed? Simon moved to the closet door. She's scared, he warned. She's been through a lot. And there's more to this situation than you know. I'm beginning to get that impression, Sheriff McKay said dryly. Simon opened the closet door slowly. Ella was curled in the corner behind some sleeping bags, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw the sheriff, she shrank back further. It's okay, Simon said gently. Sheriff McKay just wants to make sure you're safe. She's suspicious of Corrine, too. Ella looked from Simon to the sheriff, assessing, calculating. Hello, Lena, Sheriff McKay said, crouching down to appear less threatening. I'm Gwen. I'm not here to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I just need to know you're okay. Ella hesitated, then slowly emerged from her hiding place. She moved to stand beside Simon, half hidden behind his larger frame. She's safe, Simon confirmed. I found her last night during the storm. She was unconscious from hypothermia. Barefoot in the snow. Barefoot? Sheriff McKay repeated, her expression hardening. So the sock we found was removed before she was abandoned, Simon finished, deliberately, to ensure she wouldn't survive the cold. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. That's attempted murder. Yes, Simon agreed. But it's also more complicated than you know. The girl's name isn't Lena. It's Ella. Ella Wilder. She's my daughter. Sheriff McKay looked from Simon to the child with obvious skepticism. Your daughter? Mr. Wilder, are you saying this child, who has been in the foster system and then with Corrine West, is actually your daughter? Yes, Simon said firmly. She was believed to have died in a home invasion and fire 5 years ago, along with her mother, but she survived. I have proof. That's quite a claim, the sheriff said cautiously. Ella, Simon said gently, can you show Sheriff McKay your drawings? And the charm? Ella looked uncertain, but after a moment she nodded. She moved to the couch where her sketchbook lay and brought it to the sheriff, flipping to the pages that showed the attack, the fire, her escape. Sheriff McKay examined the drawings with growing concern. These are very disturbing images, she said. But they don't prove identity. Ella reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver star charm, holding it out to the sheriff. It has her initials on the back, Simon explained. E.W. Ella Wilder. I have the matching one that I gave to her mother. And there's more. She has a crescent-shaped birthmark on her shoulder. She knows a lullaby that was unique to our family. And she recognized a family photograph from before the attack. Sheriff McKay took all this in, her expression thoughtful. That's circumstantial, but intriguing. It would be easy enough to confirm with DNA testing. I'm willing to take a test immediately, Simon said. But there's something else you should know. The man who orchestrated the attack that killed my wife. The man I believe is behind Lena, Ella's abandonment, is Ira Calloway. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. Ira Calloway. The developer? I know, Simon acknowledged. But Ella has drawn him repeatedly, both in connection with the attack 5 years ago and as someone associated with Corinne West today. He wears a distinctive ring, a falcon signet, that she's included in her drawings. Sheriff McKay looked at Ella. Is this true? She asked gently. Ella nodded vigorously, then pointed to her cheek and made a slashing motion. She's saying he was injured during the attack, Simon interpreted. Cut by a broken lamp. He would have a scar. Interesting, Sheriff McKay said. Calloway does have a facial scar. He claims it's from a boating accident years ago. She studied Ella thoughtfully. Has she spoken to you at all, Mr. Wilder? A few words, Simon confirmed. Not many. Sheriff McKay nodded, then addressed Ella directly. I believe you're in danger, and I want to help, but I need to understand what happened. Can you tell me or show me how you ended up with Corinne West? Ella hesitated, then turned to a fresh page in her sketchbook. With quick, confident strokes, she began to draw. A hospital, doctors, a confused child with no identification, an orphanage, then Corinne and Ira visiting, selecting her, taking her home. The final image showed Ira looking at one of her drawings of the attack, recognition and fear on his face, followed by a hushed conversation with Corinne. He recognized her drawings, Sheriff McKay interpreted. He realized who she was, a witness to his crime. Ella nodded, relief in her eyes. This is a lot to process, the sheriff admitted, but my immediate concern is your safety. If what you're showing me is true, both of you are in danger. What do you suggest? Simon asked. I'd like to bring in a specialist, Sheriff McKay said. Someone who works with traumatized children and has experience with the foster system. Her name is Dr. Rowe. Ella's eyes widened at the name, and she nodded eagerly. You know Dr. Rowe? Sheriff McKay asked. Ella nodded again, pointing to her earlier drawing of the doctor. She worked at Crown Heights Orphanage where Ella spent time before being adopted by Corinne, Simon explained. That's quite a coincidence, Sheriff McKay said slowly. Dr. Rowe contacted me this morning. She saw the missing child report and recognized the description. She's been trying to track down a child from Crown Heights who she believed was placed with an inappropriate foster family. A child with a distinctive crescent birthmark who communicated through drawings. Ella's expression turned hopeful. I was planning to meet with her later today, Sheriff McKay continued. Now I think we should bring her here, if you're comfortable with that, Mr. Wilder. She might be able to help Ella communicate more fully, and her expertise would lend credibility to your claims. Simon looked at Ella, who nodded her approval. All right, he agreed, but I want your word that Ella stays with me until this is resolved. Sheriff McKay considered this. Legally, it's complicated, but I'll do everything in my power to keep her with you while we investigate and confirm her identity. No one benefits from traumatizing her further. Thank you, Simon said, relieved. I'll contact Dr. Rowe and arrange for her to come here, Sheriff McKay said, reaching for her radio. In the meantime, I'll need to report that the missing child has been found, but I'll be vague about the details and location. As the sheriff stepped outside to make her calls, Simon turned to Ella. Are you okay with this? With Dr. Rowe coming here? Ella nodded, then mimed writing. She helped you write before? Simon guessed. Another nod. Then I'm glad she's coming, Simon said. The more we can communicate, the better chance we have of proving who you are and what Calloway did. Ella bit her lip, then whispered, scared. I know, Simon said gently. I am too, but we're together now, and I promise I won't let anyone separate us again. Ella moved closer to him, her small body leaning against his side in a gesture of trust that meant more to Simon than any words could express. Dr. Sophia Rowe arrived at the cabin 2 hours later, driven by Sheriff McKay through roads still treacherous with snow. A tall woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses, she carried herself with calm authority that seemed to put Ella at ease immediately. "Hello, Lena," she said gently, using the name the child had known for years. "Do you remember me?" Ella nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "I've been worried about you," Dr. Rowe continued, setting down her bag and removing her coat. "I didn't think the placement with Mrs. West was appropriate." She turned to Simon, extending her hand. "Dr. Sophia Rowe, I understand you believe this child may be your daughter, presumed dead for 5 years?" "Yes," Simon said, shaking her hand. "The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. Sheriff McKay mentioned DNA testing. I've arranged for expedited testing." Sheriff McKay confirmed, stamping snow from her boots. "I have a kit in the car. Simple cheek swabs from both of you. And we should have results within 48 hours. "That's remarkably fast," Simon commented. "I called in some favors," the sheriff said with a slight smile, "and mentioned possible connections to a cold case." While Sheriff McKay retrieved the DNA kit, Dr. Rowe sat down with Ella at the kitchen table. From her bag, she removed a tablet, computer, and stylus. "I thought this might help us communicate more easily," she explained to Ella. "You can draw or write, whatever feels comfortable. I remember you were just starting to write a little when I knew you at Crown Heights." Ella took the stylus cautiously, then began to write on the tablet in careful block letters. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Dr. Rowe said warmly. "I want to help you tell your story." Over the next hour, through a combination of writing, drawing, and occasional whispered words, Ella communicated her fragmented memories to Dr. Rowe, Sheriff McKay, and Simon. The story emerged in pieces, not chronologically but as the memories surfaced. The night of the attack, hiding in the cupboard as her mother had taught her to do if bad people ever came, watching through a crack as her mother was shot, as her father fought with the intruders, one attacker being injured by a broken lamp, cursing as blood streamed down his face, Simon being struck from behind, falling unconscious, smoke filling the house as the attackers set fire to the scene, Ella crawling from her hiding place, remembering the emergency exit her parents had practiced with her. Outside, confusion, people she didn't know finding her, carrying her away from the burning house. Later, a hospital. Questions she couldn't answer, her voice gone, locked away by trauma. With no identification and no family claiming her, Ella had eventually been placed in Crown Heights Orphanage. The authorities, believing both parents dead in the fire, had processed her as an abandoned child with no known relatives. 2 years at Crown Heights, where Dr. Rowe had worked with her, trying to help her process her trauma through art therapy. Then the adoption by Corrine West, a seemingly respectable woman who had completed all the necessary paperwork and home studies. At first, life with Corrine had been tolerable if not warm. But 6 months after the adoption, Ira Calloway had entered the picture. Ella had recognized him immediately, though she hadn't known his name, the man from that terrible night, the one with the falcon ring, now sporting a scar on his cheek. Ira had recognized her too, or at least sensed something familiar about her. He had begun to watch her closely, especially her drawings. When he'd seen one depicting the attack, with the distinctive ring clearly visible, he had become agitated, convincing Corrine that Ella was disturbed and should be institutionalized. But institutions cost money, so when Corrine discovered she was pregnant with Ira's child, a simpler solution had presented itself. A remote location, a winter storm, an unfortunate accident, a child wandering off never to be found. "This is horrific," Dr. Rowe said when Ella had finished her account. "But it aligns with what I observed during her time at Crown Heights. The trauma symptoms, the specific nature of her drawings, her selective mutism, and the timing fits," Sheriff McKay added, looking through her notes. The attack on the Wilder family was in December 2003. Crown Heights records show Lena arriving in January 2004, with estimated age of 4 or 5 years. No background information available. "But why Lena?" Simon asked. Dr. Rowe smiled sadly. "It was the name on the hospital bracelet when she arrived at Crown Heights. Lina. We assumed it was her name, but thinking back, it could have been an abbreviation. Lost in natural accident perhaps, or some other hospital code." Ella was writing on the tablet again. "Ella. My name is Ella." "Yes," Dr. Rowe agreed gently. "I believe it is, and I think that deep down, you've always known that wasn't your real name. That's why you never fully responded to it." Ella nodded, tears filling her eyes. She wrote again. "I remembered pieces. Dreams the lullaby." "The lullaby," Simon repeated softly. "That's what triggered my suspicion. She started humming it yesterday. Casey's lullaby for her. It wasn't something anyone else would know." Sheriff McKay, who had been making notes, looked up. "We need to move quickly. Once Corinne realizes the search parties aren't finding any trace of Ella, she'll get nervous. And if she contacts Calloway, which seems likely, he might take more direct action. What do you suggest? Simon asked. Ella's safety first, the sheriff replied. Then gather enough evidence to move against Calloway and West. I'd like to continue working with Ella, Dr. Rowe said. Her drawings and testimony will be crucial, and I can provide expert opinion on her trauma and recovery of memories. Ella had been writing again while they spoke. She turned the tablet toward them. Ira has a book, in his office, with names. A book with names? Sheriff McKay asked. What kind of names? Ella wrote, people who helped, with the fire, and after. Accomplices, Simon realized. He kept records of who helped him attack us and cover it up. That would be extremely valuable evidence, Sheriff McKay said. But we'd need a warrant to search his property. And for that, we need more than the testimony of a traumatized child. What about the ring? Simon suggested. The Falcon signet ring. Ella has drawn it consistently. If we could prove Calloway owned it, possible, Sheriff McKay acknowledged. I can check photo archives. And I have something else, Simon said suddenly, moving to a cabinet in the corner of the room. From inside, he withdrew a plastic evidence bag containing a broken piece of ceramic lamp. This is what cut the attacker that night. I saved it. I don't know why. Maybe hoping someday it could be matched to his scar. Sheriff McKay took the bag carefully. This could be useful. If the cut left a distinctive pattern that matches Calloway's scar. A sharp crack from outside interrupted her. All four of them froze. What was that? Dr. Rowe whispered. Sounded like a branch breaking, Simon said, moving toward the window. Could be ice, could be... Another sound, unmistakable this time, a car door closing softly. Sheriff McKay was instantly alert, her hand moving to her service weapon. Are you expecting anyone, Mr. Wilder? No, Simon said grimly. No one knows I live here except a few suppliers in town. The sheriff moved efficiently to the window, staying to the side to avoid being seen. There's a black SUV parked down the access road, she reported. Simon joined her at the window, careful to remain hidden behind the curtain. Through the trees, he could make out a figure moving toward the cabin, a man in a dark coat and hat. Can you identify him? Sheriff McKay asked. Simon strained to see in the fading afternoon light. No, he's too far away, and the hat obscures his face. Ella was tugging at Dr. Rowe's sleeve, frantically writing on the tablet. Dr. Rowe looked down and her face paled. Sheriff, she said urgently. Ella says it's Ira Calloway. Sheriff McKay's expression hardened. How would he know to look here? The search parties, Simon realized. If he has contacts in local emergency services, he might have heard that the search was expanding to this area. Or he could have tracked your earlier visit here, Dr. Rowe suggested to the sheriff. Either way, we need to move, Sheriff McKay decided. Dr. Rowe, take Ella to the back bedroom. Stay away from windows. Mr. Wilder, is there another way out of this cabin? A back door off the kitchen, Simon confirmed. It leads into the woods. There's an old hunting blind about a quarter mile in that direction, well hidden. Good, the sheriff nodded. If this goes badly, that's your escape route. Get Ella to the hunting blind and wait for my signal. She handed Simon her spare radio. Channel 3 encrypted. I'll contact you when it's safe. While Dr. Rowe hurried Ella to the back bedroom, Sheriff McKay positioned herself beside the front door, out of sight from anyone entering. What's the plan? Simon asked, keeping his voice low. I'll identify myself as law enforcement and determine his purpose here, Sheriff McKay explained. If it is Calloway, his presence is suspicious but not illegal. I can't detain him. He tried to kill my daughter, Simon said through gritted teeth. Twice. I believe you, the sheriff said firmly, but we need evidence that will hold up in court. For now, our priority is keeping Ella safe and buying time for the DNA results. A knock at the door silenced their conversation. Simon took a deep breath, composing his features, and moved to answer it. Standing on his porch, exactly as Sheriff McKay had hours earlier, was Ira Calloway. In his mid-30s, expensively dressed despite the rugged surroundings, he exuded the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. A thin scar ran along his right cheekbone, partially concealed by designer stubble but still visible. On his left hand gleamed a heavy gold signet ring bearing the image of a falcon. Mr. Wilder, Calloway said smoothly. I hope I'm not intruding. My name is Ira Calloway. I'm involved with the search effort for a missing child in the area. Simon kept his expression neutral. This was the man who had murdered Casey, who had tried to kill him, who had abandoned Ella to die in the snow. It took every ounce of self-control not to attack him where he stood. I haven't seen any child, Simon said flatly. Calloway's eyes narrowed slightly. Good, good. We're all just trying to help find this poor lost girl. What exactly is your interest in the search, Mr. Calloway? Simon asked, not inviting him inside. You're not with emergency services or law enforcement. No, Calloway agreed with a practiced smile. But I'm close to the family. The foster mother, Corinne West, is a dear friend. She's distraught. I'm sure she is, Simon said, unable to keep a hint of sarcasm from his voice. Calloway studied him more closely. Have we met before, Mr. Wilder? I don't think so, Simon replied evenly. I keep to myself. Calloway murmured, his gaze fixing on Simon's scar. That's quite an injury you have there. Accident? Home invasion, Simon said, watching Calloway's reaction closely. 5 years ago. A flash of something, recognition, concern, crossed Calloway's face before his smooth mask returned. How unfortunate. Well, I won't take up any more of your time. If you do happen to see anything of the missing girl, please contact authorities immediately. Before Simon could respond, Sheriff McKay stepped into view, her badge visible on her belt. Mr. Calloway, she said calmly, this is an unexpected surprise. I wasn't aware you were participating in the search efforts. Calloway's composure slipped momentarily. Sheriff McKay, yes, as I was just explaining to Mr. Wilder, I'm concerned about the child. Corinne is a close friend. How did you happen to choose this particular cabin to check? The sheriff asked, her tone conversational but her eyes sharp. It's quite remote. I've been stopping at all the properties in this sector, Calloway claimed, following the search grid provided by emergency services. Interesting, Sheriff McKay said, because this property isn't on any search grid. It's outside the established search area, and it's not listed in county property records under its current ownership. Calloway's smile tightened. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding with the coordinates I was given. Perhaps, the sheriff agreed. In any case, as you can see, the missing child isn't here, and Mr. Wilder values his privacy. Of course, Calloway said, backing up a step. I apologize for the intrusion. As he turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind blew through the open door, carrying with it a distinctive sound from the back of the cabin, the creak of a floorboard, followed by the faintest whisper of a child's voice. Calloway froze, his head turning toward the sound. Is someone else here, Mr. Wilder? Just the wind, Simon said, moving to close the door. These old cabins make all kinds of noises. But Calloway was already pushing past him, moving with surprising speed into the cabin. I heard a child's voice, he insisted, heading toward the back bedrooms. Sheriff McKay intercepted him, physically blocking his path. Mr. Calloway, you are trespassing on private property. I suggest you leave immediately. Calloway's demeanor changed instantly, the affable mask dropping away to reveal cold calculation. You've found her, haven't you? There is no child here, Sheriff McKay stated firmly. And you are leaving now. You don't understand, Calloway said, his voice hardening. That girl is dangerous, disturbed. She has violent fantasies, delusions. Her foster mother has been trying to get her proper psychiatric care. Is that why Corinne abandoned her barefoot in the snow? Simon asked, unable to contain his anger any longer. Calloway's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. I don't know what the child has told you, but she's a habitual liar. She ran away from the cabin. Save it, Sheriff McKay said coldly. We know what happened, Mr. Calloway. We know who the child really is. And we know what you did 5 years ago at the Wilder house. All pretense dropped from Calloway's expression, replaced by a calculating coldness. You have a traumatized, delusional child making wild accusations. Nothing more. We have evidence, Simon countered. Physical evidence linking you to the attack that killed my wife. Your wife? Calloway repeated, feigning confusion though his eyes betrayed him. Mr. Wilder, I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Sheriff McKay said, her hand resting on her holstered weapon. And I think it's time for you to leave. We'll continue this conversation at the station, with your lawyer present if you prefer. For a tense moment, it seemed Calloway might refuse. His gaze darted around the cabin, assessing, calculating. Then, abruptly, his demeanor shifted again, the mask of concerned citizen returning. Clearly there's been some misunderstanding, he said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. I only want what's best for the child. If you've found her, I'm relieved. I'll inform Corinne that the search can be called off. You do that, Sheriff McKay said, not relaxing her vigilant posture. And Mr. Calloway, don't leave town. With a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, Calloway backed toward the door. Of course, Sheriff. I'm always happy to cooperate with law enforcement. His gaze shifted to Simon. We'll talk again, Mr. Wilder. I'm sure of it. The threat beneath the polite words was unmistakable. After Calloway had gone, Sheriff McKay moved quickly to the window, watching until his SUV pulled away down the access road. He'll be back, she said grimly, with reinforcements, legal or otherwise. Simon was already moving toward the back bedroom. Ella? Dr. Rowe? The bedroom door opened cautiously. Dr. Rowe emerged, Ella close behind her, clutching the tablet like a shield. The child's face was pale with fear, her eyes wide. "We heard everything," Dr. Rowe said. Ella nearly fainted when she heard his voice. Ella was writing frantically on the tablet. She held it up. "He will hurt us. He has people who help him." "She's right," Sheriff McKay agreed. "Calloway has resources and connections. And now he knows we're onto him." "What do we do?" Simon asked, placing a protective hand on Ella's shoulder. "We need to move you both to a secure location," the sheriff decided. "Somewhere Calloway wouldn't think to look. The DNA samples are already on their way to the lab. Once we have those results, we can move more aggressively against Calloway and West." "My house," Dr. Rowe offered. "It's in Riverton, outside county lines. I have a guest apartment with a separate entrance, very private. Calloway wouldn't have any reason to connect me to this situation." Sheriff McKay considered this. "That could work. I'll arrange for discreet transportation and additional security." Ella was writing again. "What about the book?" "In Ira's office." "We still don't have enough for a warrant," Sheriff McKay said regretfully. "But I know someone who might be able to help with that," Dr. Rowe said thoughtfully. "A teenager named Nia Henderson. She babysits for several families in Calloway's neighborhood, including occasionally for Corrine. She contacted me about a month ago with concerns about Ella's welfare." "Nia," Simon repeated, the name triggering a memory. "She's mentioned in the file Sheriff McKay showed me. A neighbor who was suspicious of Corrine." "Yes," Dr. Rowe confirmed. "She's very bright, very observant, and she genuinely cared about Ella." Sheriff McKay looked conflicted. "I can't officially sanction using a civilian, especially a minor, in an investigation." "Unofficially?" Simon pressed. The sheriff sighed. "Unofficially, information obtained through legal means by a concerned citizen could potentially be useful in establishing probable cause for a warrant. I'll contact her," Dr. Rowe decided. "But first, let's get you and Ella to safety." As they prepared to leave, gathering the few belongings Ella had and some essentials for Simon, a low rumble of thunder sounded in the distance. Ella froze, her face draining of color. "Storm coming," Sheriff McKay noted, glancing out the window at the darkening sky. "We should move quickly before the roads get bad again." But Ella wasn't responding to the practical concern about travel conditions. She was staring into space, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow, her small body beginning to tremble. "Ella?" Simon said, concerned. "What's wrong?" Dr. Rowe recognized the symptoms immediately. "She's having a flashback," she explained quietly. Ella suddenly dropped to the floor, crawling rapidly toward the kitchen cabinets. She pulled one open and attempted to climb inside, curling into a tight ball, her eyes unseeing, fixed on horrors only she could perceive. "Hide," she whispered, her voice childlike and terrified. "Mommy said hide. Don't make a sound. They're coming through the windows." Simon knelt beside the cabinet, his heart breaking for his daughter's renewed trauma. "Ella," he said gently, not touching her, knowing it might make the flashback worse. "Ella, you're safe. It's 2008, not 2003. You're with me, with your father." But Ella was lost in the past, reliving the worst night of her life. "They hurt Mommy," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's not moving. Daddy's fighting them." The lamp broke. His face is bleeding. The man with the bird ring. Daddy fell down. "Not moving. Fire. Smoke. Can't breathe." Her words came faster now, tumbling out as if a dam had broken, memories flooding back with terrifying clarity. "The window in my room. Mommy showed me. If there's ever fire, push the screen, climb down the tree, run to Mr. Wilson's house next door." Dr. Rowe had moved closer, kneeling beside Simon. "She's remembering her escape route," she said softly. "This is important. Let her continue if she can." Ella's voice grew stronger, the words flowing more freely than they had in years. "I climbed down. The tree scratched me, but the house was burning. Mr. Wilson wasn't home. There were other men in the yard. They grabbed me, put me in a car. Not police. They had the same ring, birds on their hands. Accomplices," Sheriff McKay murmured, taking notes. "Calloway's men. They said I saw nothing, I know nothing. If I talk, they'll find me. They'll hurt me." Ella's voice broke on a sob. "They left me at the hospital. Said I was found wandering. No name, no family. But I had my star. Mommy put it in my pocket that night. For good luck." She clutched the silver charm in her small fist, the same way Simon had found her in the hollow beneath the fallen tree. The orphanage was cold. The other children were loud. I couldn't talk, wouldn't talk. Drawing was safer, but still dangerous if I drew the wrong things. Ella's breathing was calming slightly. Then Corrine came. She seemed nice at first, until she brought him home. The man with the scar, the man with the bird ring. The clarity and coherence of Ella's speech was astonishing after days of near silence. Dr. Rowe had tears in her eyes as she witnessed what she recognized as a breakthrough in Ella's trauma recovery. "The overlook," Ella continued, her voice stronger now. She made me take off my shoes, said they were muddy, but they weren't. She drove away, left me there. I knew I would die if I stayed, so I walked. My feet hurt, so cold. I found the tree, tried to hide. Then, she looked at Simon, really seeing him. You found me. You followed my footprints. Yes, Simon said, his own voice thick with emotion. You have a scar now, she said, reaching out to touch his face tentatively. Yes, Simon confirmed. I couldn't save your mother. I couldn't save you. I've carried that failure every day for 5 years. Not your fault, Ella said firmly. You tried. I saw you fighting them. You were brave. The simple absolution from his daughter's lips broke something in Simon that had been brittle and sharp for years. Tears filled his eyes as he opened his arms, offering an embrace. Ella hesitated only a moment before launching herself into his arms, clinging to him as if afraid he might disappear. Daddy, she sobbed against his chest. I remembered everything. I know, sweetheart, Simon murmured, holding her gently. I know. And now we're going to make sure the people who hurt our family pay for what they did. Sheriff McKay and Dr. Rowe had stepped back, giving father and daughter a moment of privacy within the small cabin. The sheriff was still taking notes, recording the spontaneous testimony that might prove crucial in building their case against Calloway. This changes things, she said quietly to Dr. Rowe. With Ella's recovered memories and ability to communicate, we have a much stronger case. If we can get corroborating evidence, Naya might be our best hope for that, Dr. Rowe replied. The thunder rumbled again, closer now. But this time Ella didn't flinch. She remained in her father's arms, her face buried against his chest, her breathing slowly steadying. Dr. Rowe's house in Riverton was a tidy craftsman bungalow on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees. The guest apartment above the detached garage offered privacy and security, with its own entrance and a clear view of the street below. By the time they arrived, the storm had passed, leaving behind the fresh, clean scent of rain-washed air. Ella, exhausted from her emotional breakthrough, had fallen asleep in the car. Simon carried her gently. She'll sleep deeply tonight, Dr. Rowe predicted as they gathered in the apartment's cozy living room. But it's a positive sign, isn't it? Simon asked, her ability to speak, to remember. Very positive, Dr. Rowe confirmed. Sheriff McKay, who had been on her phone since their arrival, joined them at the small dining table. I've arranged for a deputy to patrol this area tonight, she reported. Do you think Calloway will come after us? Simon asked. It's a risk we have to consider, the sheriff acknowledged. He knows we're connecting him to the attack 5 years ago. He knows Ella can identify him. What about Corrine? Dr. Rowe asked. My deputies brought her in for a formal interview after we found the sock at the Overlook, Sheriff McKay explained. She's sticking to her story about Ella wandering off, but she's nervous. Keeps asking if we've found anything else. Good, Simon said firmly. Keep it that way as long as possible. And I've contacted Nia, Dr. Rowe added. She's agreed to meet us tomorrow morning. Simon nodded, feeling a spark of hope despite the exhaustion weighing on him. We wait, Sheriff McKay confirmed, and we prepare. I want to record a formal statement from Ella tomorrow. With her recovered memories and ability to communicate, her testimony will be powerful. Will she have to testify in court? Simon asked. Possibly, the sheriff admitted. But there are accommodations for child witnesses, especially in cases involving trauma. The night passed without incident. Simon slept lightly, waking at every small sound, his body tensed for danger. Morning brought sunshine and a renewed sense of purpose. Ella awoke, seeming transformed, still quiet, still cautious, but with a new lightness to her movements. How are you feeling? Simon asked as she joined him at the small kitchen table where Dr. Rowe had left breakfast for them. Better, Ella said. That's good, Simon said, marveling at hearing his daughter's voice after so many years of silence. Dr. Rowe says talking about it will help. Ella nodded. Is she coming back? And the sheriff? Yes, very soon. And they're bringing someone named Nia. Ella's face brightened. Nia was nice. She babysit me sometimes when Corrine went out. She brought me art supplies. Secret ones, because Corrine took away my sketchbooks after. After what? Simon prompted. After she caught me drawing the bird ring? Simon's jaw tightened at this further evidence. Well, we know you weren't making things up. And soon everyone else will know too. An hour later, Dr. Rowe arrived with Sheriff McKay and a tall, serious-looking teenager with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Nia Henderson carried herself with the composure of someone much older. To Simon's surprise, Ella immediately went to Nia and hugged her, a gesture of trust she had only recently extended to him and Dr. Rowe. Nia has been a tremendous advocate for Ella, Dr. Rowe explained. She was the first to raise concerns about Corrine's treatment of her. I just paid attention, Nia said. Once they were all settled in the living room, Nia opened her backpack and removed a tablet similar to Dr. Rowe's. I've been gathering evidence for months, originally just about Corinne's neglect, leaving Ella alone for hours, forgetting to feed her, that kind of thing. But then I started noticing weird stuff with Calloway too. She pulled up a series of photographs on the tablet. These are from the last 3 months. Calloway meeting with these same 3 men at different locations around town. I recognized one of them, Nia continued. Tyler Keene. He works for county records. My mom's a real estate agent and says he can make paperwork disappear for the right price. Sheriff McKay studied the photos with interest. This could be useful. Establishing Calloway's connections to county officials might help explain how he's avoided scrutiny for so long. There's more, Nia said, swiping to a new set of images. These are from Calloway's office in his home. I babysit for the family next door, and their yard connects to his. The photos, taken from a distance but clear enough, showed a home office with an impressive desk. On the bookshelf behind it sat a distinctive red leather-bound book. That's the book Ella mentioned, Simon realized. Nia nodded. I've seen him writing in it. Very secretive about it. He locks it in a drawer whenever anyone comes into the room. But once, when I was dropping off some paperwork for Corinne, I got a glimpse inside. It had names, dates, amounts, payments to accomplices, Sheriff McKay suggested. There's one more thing, Nia said, pulling a small USB drive from her pocket. 2 weeks ago, I overheard Corinne and Calloway arguing about Ella. Calloway wanted to send her away permanently. I recorded it on my phone. She plugged the USB drive into the tablet and played the audio. Calloway's voice irritated. She's remembering, Corinne. Those drawings are getting more detailed. We can't risk it. Corinne, whining. But if she just disappears, there will be investigations. I could lose everything. Calloway, cold. Better that than both of us in prison for what happened at the Wilder house. Corinne, surprised. You said that was just a business rivalry gone bad. You never mentioned murder. Calloway, angry now. Keep your voice down. It doesn't matter what I told you. What matters is that girl is a threat. She needs to be eliminated. I've arranged everything for this weekend. The cabin trip, the overlook. You just need to leave her there. Make sure she has no shoes, no coat. Corinne, hesitant. I don't know, Ira. Calloway, threatening. You don't have a choice. Remember, you're implicated too. And with our baby coming, you wouldn't want to be raising it from prison. This is it, Sheriff McKay said finally. This is what we needed. She turned to Nia with newfound respect. How did you manage to record this? I left my phone in the kitchen when I went to use the bathroom. Nia explained. That was incredibly brave, Dr. Rowe said. Nia shrugged, though her expression betrayed her awareness of the risk she'd taken. Someone had to do something. Throughout this exchange, Ella had been sitting quietly beside Simon, listening intently. Now she spoke up, her voice small but clear. Nia tried to help me. She brought me food when Corinne forgot. She let me use her phone to look up art videos. She was my only friend. Nia's composed facade cracked slightly at this. I should have done more, she said. You did everything right, Sheriff McKay assured her. And your evidence may be what finally brings Calloway to justice. She stood, suddenly energized. I need to take this to the judge immediately. Dr. Rowe, can you drive Nia home? Mr. Wilder, you and Ella should stay here until I return. As Sheriff McKay prepared to leave, her phone rang. She answered. That was the lab, she announced. The DNA results are in. It's a match. Simon pulled Ella close, his throat too tight for words. I'll add this to the warrant application, Sheriff McKay said. It strengthens our case considerably. Within 2 hours, the sheriff returned with the warrants in hand and a team of deputies ready to move. The operation would be coordinated. Simultaneous raids on Calloway's home office to secure the Red Book and an arrest of both Calloway and Corinne West on multiple charges. I want you both to stay here with Dr. Rowe. Sheriff McKay instructed Simon and Ella. It's safest, Simon nodded. The wait was excruciating. Simon and Ella sat with Dr. Rowe in the small apartment, attempting normal activities. A game of cards, a simple lunch, while their thoughts remained fixed on the operation underway across town. Finally, nearly 4 hours after she'd left, Sheriff McKay called. It's done, she reported, her voice tired but satisfied. Calloway and West are both in custody. And we found the book. It's exactly what Ella described. Names, dates, payments. How did they react? Simon asked. West broke immediately, the sheriff said. She's already offering to testify against Calloway in exchange for leniency. Calloway demanded his lawyer and hasn't said a word since. Smart, Simon commented. But it won't help him, will it? No, Sheriff McKay confirmed. Between Ella's testimony, the physical evidence, the recording Nia provided, and now this ledger, he's finished. We're already identifying the accomplices from the book. Several arrests are underway, including the county official Nia photographed. What happens now? Simon asked. "Now you can come home," the sheriff said simply. "Ella's identity has been legally confirmed. As her father, you have full parental rights. And Calloway? Corrine? They'll face trial. Given the evidence, conviction is all but certain. Calloway is looking at life without parole for Casey's murder, plus additional charges for the attempt on Ella's life. Corrine will likely serve significant time as well." After the call ended, Simon knelt in front of Ella, taking her small hands in his. "It's over," he said gently. "Calloway and Corrine have been arrested." Ella's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of fear or sadness. "We can go home?" she asked. "Yes," Simon confirmed. 3 months later, Simon stood on the porch of their new home, watching as Ella carefully arranged her drawings on the living room wall. The house was nothing grand, a modest 3-bedroom on the outskirts of town, but it had everything they needed. Ella had flourished in the weeks since Calloway's arrest. With Dr. Rowe's help, the trial was still months away, but the evidence against Calloway was overwhelming. Several of his associates had already pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony against him. Corrine, true to form, had turned state's evidence, providing detailed accounts of Calloway's schemes and her own role in them. Snow had begun to fall again, the first light dusting of the season. Ella noticed it through the window and came to stand beside Simon on the porch. "It's pretty when you're warm and safe," she observed, watching the flakes drift lazily down. "Yes," Simon agreed, putting an arm around her shoulders. Ella leaned against him, comfortable now with physical affection. "Can we visit Mom's grave tomorrow?" "Of course," Simon said. They had established a routine of visiting Casey's grave once a week, leaving small tokens, flowers, drawings. As they watched the snow fall, Ella suddenly spoke, her voice thoughtful. "What should I tell people? About what happened to me, I mean, when they ask?" Simon considered this carefully. "What do you want to tell them?" Ella was quiet for a moment. "I want to tell them I survived," she said finally. Simon hugged her closer, his heart full. "That's perfect," he said, "because that's exactly what you did. The past could not be erased, but it no longer defined them. What mattered now was the path ahead, a path they would walk side by side, leaving new footprints in the snow."